There is one final event and moment in this year's installment of Zeitgeist, and that is a conversation with the people who made it all possible, in a sense. That is Sergey Brin and Larry Page, the co-founders of Google. It is a marvelous thing you all have created. I remember when I first met both of you 7 years ago, and you were so gracious to come and address a journalism class I was teaching at UC Berkeley then. I've always been touched by your attentiveness. Who could have imagined the scale of what you've created? I wanted to ask you, start off by asking some questions regarding scale. When we first met, and until very recently, everything about Google was perceived as being cute, charming, marvelous. It was there was no one who could say a bad word about Google in any sense. Recently, we've seen stories about whether we should be afraid of Google, whether Google is becoming too powerful. Larry, should we be afraid of Google?
Wow, he just cut right to the chase. No, I don't think I think it's always worth considering. But one of the things I've been really excited about in helping build the company is that we've had the wisdom of coming later than a lot of technology companies. And I think as you see us do more and more things, we're really going to try to be a lot more open than people had previously. And I think Sergey and I probably really, and Eric really benefit from being kind of computer scientists who grew up in a university, using open source and using some of the tools Eric made actually, and see the benefit of that kind of openness. And I think we're really excited about being successful and being a lot more open about how we do things and having a different model kind of how we do things. And I noticed also our people got really excited about that, and they work much harder, and they're more committed, and they build more beautiful things. And so I guess I'm really excited about that, of being a different kind of company.
Yeah, great. I'm going to ask if the house lights can start coming up now so that people can start seeing making their ways to the microphones. I have a couple of other questions. Sergey, I have a question for you also involving scale. One of Google's distinguishing traits has been rapidity of change, the new products you keep producing all the time. That's relatively harder and harder as you have a larger group, even of very talented engineers. So how have you found a way to manage the combination of the creative chaos that's been indispensable to your success and the scale that's a result of your success?
Yeah, the way I like to think about it is that I'm not trying to maintain our culture or to maintain the level of creativity, but we always try to improve it and increase it. Certainly scale presents some challenges, but it also presents opportunities. For example, if you look at the infrastructure that we have now, the kind of computational facilities, now when we want to run a kind of a experiment that would have been inconceivable to anyone just a few years ago, we can get it done in, a few hours' time maybe even. And so this really opens new possibilities. You at the same time have to make sure that the scale doesn't slow you down in terms of doing innovative things. The way we've kind of historically come at it is we try to divide our company into chunks. It's the 70-20-10 rule. 70% try to work on the core efforts of the company, 20% goes to adjacent areas of expansion, and 10% kind of anything goes. And in some ways, as we've expanded our breadth of offerings, it's actually harder and harder to find the 10% that are out there. But I think it's important to let people be really creative and think outside the box. The real challenge in scale, to me, has been offering a coherent set of services and offerings to our end users, because there's kind of a limit. There's a limit to my ability. There's a limit to everyone's ability to, choose among 50 different things. And so we've been trying to change the paradigm from products to features. So enhance the capability of all of our existing offerings across the board, rather than creating a new silo out there that makes this incredibly long menu for people to choose from.
I have, Larry, another semi-oddball question for you, although it comes from the tone of our conversations here in the last day and a half. One theme that's run through it is the vulnerability of democratic society to distorted news. When the news doesn't introduce people to scientific reality, when it gets them all caught up in hysterias, it's very hard to deal with serious issues. I know that you've talked about this problem yourself. It's also the case that many people say Google is in a sense to blame for this because Google has made it harder for established news media to stay in business. So tell us how you think about this news and democratic information question, whether Google is responsible and what Google can do about it, if you feel it is in any way.
Well, actually, I guess I should recommend your book, Breaking the News, which I read a while ago. It definitely covers a lot of those points in really interesting detail. I think I've been really excited about the possibility for making coverage, improving the state of information in general, not just news, but that's sort of our core mission, is really organize the world's information. And in terms of doing good for the world, I think, if you can do a better, make that even a little bit better, it has a huge impact on all the civic institutions and companies and everything that goes on. I think in terms of the news, I think that it's been really interesting for me to watch the whole kind of blogger versus reporter debate. And I mean, I love having lots of professional people who think really hard about the issues and have a lot of experience and have traveled widely and all that. And I think one of the things we can do a much better job of as an industry is to make the professionals also more productive. And if you look at blogging, one of the nice things about bloggers is they actually link to each other. But when I read, the New York Times article, it doesn't link to the Wall Street Journal or vice versa. And instead, they have to kind of rewrite the story. And then, so I think there are ways that as we evolve onto an online, things can get edited over time and linked to each other and commented on and so on, that those paradigms have to change, and that can help the news organizations that we have now be more competitive with some of the online things, which I think are generally, it's nice to have the professionals doing it. I think it'd be nice to have more professionals be able to support it by the business models, by having more interest and better quality and so on. So I guess I'm a big fan of that. We recently released this thing that lets people comment on stories they're named in Google News, which is a small step. But we've already seen some interesting things happen there with university presidents and other people. And we felt like it can enhance the debate, for example, if we're able to comment directly, like, for example, when we're mentioned in stories. And also make it more interesting to read and make people more money as a result. So anyway, I think there's a lot of things that can be done. I'm excited about helping improve that online.
And can you imagine Google ever owning an existing news operation itself, as some people have proposed? Or Orville Schell from Berkeley used to suggest that you should buy a newspaper represented here, the New York Times.
Well, I wouldn't have predicted Rupert Murdoch would buy the Wall Street Journal, so I think it's hard to predict the future, but we don't have any plans to do anything like that.
And I know Mr. Sulzberger, I think, is here too. You can talk later. Question now for Sergey also. Can you tell us either what kinds of things or what specifics you and Larry and Eric disagree about and how you resolve them when that comes up?
Let's see. We have relatively few disagreements, actually. And, and most of the time, usually don't care so much, or certainly all three of us might not care so much. So, honestly, I would typically just go for 2 out of 3. That's why it's good to have an odd number. And significant disagreements when people really feel strongly about something, though, I think, you really have to take the time and talk it through. I remember the most controversial thing I recently did was to reduce the amount of snacks we have available. And it took a long time to persuade first Larry and Eric, but even having accomplished that, the rest of the staff was resistant. And no matter what we said, food kept arriving in vast quantities to the snack bins. After about a couple of years, I prevailed, and they reduced the amount of food.
They've recently ramped it back up.
I know, so it's one of the
Story
things.
of life.
It's true. You need to watch those things. People kind of don't realize that they also complained that it wasn't as good. But if you restock something and it's available for the taking, and you want to reduce the consumption, you have to make it less appealing. There's really no way to get around that.
So please, I have one more brief question for each of our founders. Please come to the microphones. My question for Larry is, tell us about the X Prize. Why is Google involved in this?
Well, actually, maybe Sergey should adjust that a little bit. I've been on the board of the X Prize for a while and been really excited. I guess I've been really motivated by people who had tried to win prizes. So there's the Human-Powered Airplane by Paul McCready, for example. He was always kind of a hero of mine. And I was amazed, you know, he won that for, I think, £50,000 prize, and he actually lost. He sort of spent twice as much money as that doing it, which is typical of prizes. And so just the effectiveness is that as a way to inspire people. And I came across Peter at the X Prize, and you know, it was an amazing story with Burt Rutan's Spaceship One, which is hanging over in Building 43 right across the courtyard there.
A copy of it.
A copy of it, yes. It's made from the original molds. It could probably fly, but it might break into pieces. But in any case, I was just really excited about that and tried to encourage them to branch out into more different areas. And Sergey actually got really excited about doing a moon mission. And we convinced him it would be easier if we just put up some money, which we only had to pay out if it was successful. And so that's how that came about. And it's been a great collaboration and a lot of fun.
Yeah. So you can either say more about that, or a related question, what technology or what application, what's most exciting to you right now?
Well, I'm personally excited about materials advancements and nanotechnology, carbon nanotubes and whatnot. It's not particularly related to our existing business so much, but I feel like the kinds of improvements we're seeing in both, you know, the strength of materials, and lightness, battery capacity, things like that. I mean, I think these things can actually make very material differences in our lives. The cost of solar power, as you know, you see the photovoltaics dropping, and if they continue to drop, you know what that will mean for our environment. All of those things are very exciting, and it's actually not that popular, I think, a subject these days for students and whatnot. So I think it's somewhat underinvested, but has dramatic capability to change the world.
It is your turn now, so we'll turn first here and then here. Please identify yourself and ask your question.
Sure. Deli Tamer, founder of Let's Talk. A quick question. First, congratulations on having changed the world. The press keeps talking about the next Google. I was going to ask you, what are you doing so that you are the next Google, and who do you fear the most among existing companies?
Well, first, I certainly do hope that Google is the next Google, but I also hope to see many other successful companies. And certainly on the internet, our whole business depends on the fact that there are lots of these other great websites. And what we do in search is we send people to other sites, and there's just a huge diversity of fantastic websites out there. There's How Stuff Works. That's a website I like to read personally. Some of these new social networking sites, MySpace, Facebook, that have lots of attention and usage. All of these things are part of our ecosystem, and we want it to be rich and diverse. And we hope to continue providing by far the best in class of monetization to these kinds of sites, so they can stay in business and continue to produce great content, and certainly continue to navigate people to the places they should get to via great search, and now as well as some of our other kinds of communications facilities that allow people to tell each other about these sites.
I was going to say, I think it'd be great if Sergey mentioned solar power. I think there's a lot of opportunities there in solar thermal and other kinds of solar power. It'd be great to see a huge company come about there and really produce a lot of energy.
Yeah. Yes.
Tim Carter from AskTheBuilder.com. I was lucky enough to come to the first and second Zeitgeist, and I want you to realize that information that was made possible through those conferences has changed my business dramatically and caused it to grow. So I have to believe that there's other people in the audience, and we want to thank you personally for putting these on, because they're just fantastic events, and thanks very much.
We should thank
maybe
a round of applause for the team.
They're shy, but we'll bring them out later.
We didn't really do much. We just kind of show up.
Well, no, I think you and Eric have a lot to do with it. But needless to say, I'm a content creator. And earlier this morning, there was a really good presentation by the advertising and marketing panel where they were talking about quality, not only quality of people that they need technically to produce the ads and the marketing. But my question to you, because you're so interested in organizing the world's information and content, is do you have any suggestions or advice for those of us who are in the content creation business, what we could do to make it better, to better fit into Google's vision? You know, it's a kind of a broad question, but what would you like to see us do? I mean, to make it better?
Well, I think one of the things that tends to really decrease perhaps the utility of sites is when maybe they go a little bit overboard on the fanciness, really fancy JavaScript and Flash stuff and everything flying around. And that has, you know, two negative effects. One is it's actually harder for users, and you're, you know, it might slow down your computer. You might be on like an iPhone or some other device that can't deal with the really fancy stuff. Or maybe even iPhone's actually pretty good web browser, but even lower end mobile device.
Actually, I was traveling. I was trying to find a restaurant, and their only web page was like a Flash-based web page, and I had my iPhone. I actually couldn't find the restaurant. I had to call somebody.
Yeah. So it decreases the utility for the user, and not that I particularly want you to worry about this so much, but it does make it somewhat harder for our search engine to, you know, parse through all the stuff. Well, what's the real information on the site? Yeah, so I would kind of just try to discourage people, you know, use new technologies when it really makes sense and there's a really, really good reason for it. And, you know, we do that, for example, with Maps. It uses some fancy JavaScript, but only if there's a very good reason, and try to keep things as simple as possible.
You should give your people stopwatches too, and time what extra time those features take. And then you can calculate, you multiply it out, and compute an average person's lifetime, and you can compute how many people you've killed.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yes.
Outer space is really cool, but I'm not sure how much Google could do with it. Inner space or healthcare is a really interesting market. I'm curious what your strategy is in that.
We've been certainly many people like Esther and many others have approached us about health and the information technology challenges within health. We have, and we've been trying to see where we can contribute our technology that really will help there. I don't think we have anything to share with you today, but generally I have a sense of optimism about what our health team might be able to accomplish, simplify things, but it's not going to be able to, you know, somehow reform healthcare on its own. I mean, I think what we'll provide will be a small piece of the puzzle, and fundamentally, you know, our goals are shared. For example, Microsoft's doing health work, and we want to see them succeed. We want to see lots of companies that are trying to improve the state of information technology within health be successful. I mean, and I want to just from, you know, personal selfish point of view, I mean, I feel like I have sort of suboptimal health care because I don't have, you know, my records very easily accessible or easy to use. And I feel everyone in this country and the world deserves that.
Larry, did you want to say something or not? Yeah. Okay.
No, I mean, I was just saying, you know, it's pain to fill out all this stuff, and it's also pain that, I mean, there are some countries that track prescription drugs and things like that, and non-prescription even, and they use that to determine what's going on with their public health system and things like that. So I do think that having information about what's happening in the healthcare system that's available for scientific study and public health and so on is very, very useful. It can be done very cheaply, but we're somehow unable to do that.
Yes, over here.
Hi, guys. The ecosystem you've created is amazing. It allows little companies to grow and thrive. Can you have the same impact on display advertising as you've had on text and search-based advertising? Is that in your wheelhouse? Is that something you're pursuing? Can you disrupt display advertising as dramatically as you have in the search world?
We don't like to use the word disrupt, but we certainly hope to make it a lot more efficient, both more valuable for the sites and more effective for the advertisers. And I'm pretty optimistic on that. We have a lot of things that we're doing right now in the early stages. We have our site-targeted campaigns. We have graphical ads. I think some Flash formats are now available, and some HTML widget formats are also available. So we're continually producing new things. But in the long run, yeah, we certainly want to have as big of a change in display advertising, RPM-wise and conversion-wise, as we've been lucky enough to do for search. I can't guarantee that will happen, but that's our goal.
Thanks.
And over here, please identify yourself.
Jerry Corbett with Hitachi. Gentlemen, thank you for putting this on. This is a great conference and probably one of the best that I've been to, and this is my third one. But I wanted to ask about a past Zeitgeist in which you folks talked about how to deal with the clutter of power supplies, and if you could give us an update on that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'm actually late on my delivery on that. I was hoping to have solved it by this Zeitgeist. We actually reviewed a number of technological fixes, and there's in fact a couple of companies out there that have some really nice technologies that might help for a universal power supply. And we're currently talking to them, see how we can help them, and see how we can move partners along. But it's I got to be honest with you, it's a harder problem than I thought, and it's not really well, except for the advent of USB mini USB plugs for cell phones becoming more and more standard. It's not actually improved much over the past year. In fact, many laptops and things have introduced new and diverse power supplies, and yeah, it's been unsuccessful to date.
We have the new laptop supplies with additional 1 volt. Different plugs.
Yeah, so, and that's sort of failure on my behalf, because I don't think I've been as aggressive about it as I could have been. But there are a couple very promising technologies in the works that, combined with some business magic, maybe could actually start to tackle the problem.
So these are the 2 limits on your power: snacks and power supplies. You can do anything else, but those are where you run into the world.
They're all rapidly multiplying.
Yeah, I'm Randall Rothenberg. I'm the president of the Interactive Advertising Bureau. You're great members of ours. As you know, there's a rising tide of sentiment in Washington, and probably in state capitals as well, around regulating the internet around privacy issues. There's an FTC hearing in a couple weeks on behavioral targeting. There is a bill that passed the House that actually would heavily regulate the use of cookies. What should we as an industry be doing to deal with the potential of regulation? How do we calm and educate the public about this, and what is Google doing?
Yeah, I really think education is the key. And, the thing that people don't, kind of miss is, we deal with a ton of privacy issues every day, but almost none of them, or really none of them, have anything to do with cookies or advertising or anything like that. The number one privacy issue we deal with is there's some information about someone on the web. Sometimes it's embarrassing, sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not true. And people just publish stuff. And it's, across many, many websites, and it's a real issue for people. What we do today is, we say, you have to talk to the site's owner to get the information taken down, and then if you do, then we'll rip it out of the index really quickly. But as we move forward, that's obviously not adequate for people in some cases. Some cases the site doesn't cooperate, and some cases they're right, some cases they're wrong. Maybe they were convicted of some crime that people should be aware of, maybe not. But I think we really need to think about this question, because the rules around whatever libel and whatnot, I mean, they were really at a different time, in a different situation, when information didn't travel around the world in a fraction of a second. So I think it's really worth thinking about how do we want to manage privacy of ourselves in an online world where anybody can publish anything at any time. And that's by far the number one thing, that privacy issue that we're addressed with. Number two behind that is probably various things where people get their machines hijacked, or somebody manages to get their password, breaks into various accounts of theirs. There's a whole rigmarole of stuff like that that we have to deal with. And honestly, I think the kind of privacy concerns that people have around cookies and whatnot are more of sort of Big Brother type fears. They're not actually so much a privacy issue as, do these people feel comfortable that, you were, large successful company or advertiser, and do they really trust what you're doing? Even though the privacy implications by comparison are very small.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Dan Murray, Ravenwood Marketing. There was an article in Tuesday's Wall Street Journal about efforts to save energy and save electricity, and it talks specifically about servers as a huge energy user. I think it estimated 14% of electricity use in this country is from servers. I just wanted to better understand, I know you guys are very active in this area, your efforts to cut down on electricity use with your massive server farms.
Yeah, one thing we did actually, we have announced a whole initiative along with Intel and a whole bunch of computer manufacturers to try to implement sort of green technology within servers. And those things have to do with power supplies and sort of best practices, which we've been lucky enough to be involved in building large amounts of servers ourselves. And we've noticed, there are some things you can do to reduce power significantly and make sure that, all the power you're taking out of the outlet's really going into the, the CPU or whatever is part of your computer. And those things can make large differences, probably easily 30% kind of, you can sort of take out 30% very easily and still get, the same amount of computation you would have before, and you pay, your payback is like 1 year in terms of your electricity savings into capital cost. So we've been hard at work on those things, and we're happy to tell you more about those. I think overall, computers are probably going to use a larger and larger percentage of electricity, because the amount of money that they cost versus the amount of power they use is, steadily increasing the amount of power they use. And I assume they'll be limited by the capacity of your wall plugs. So in Europe, they'll use twice as much power as they do in the US, because they have twice the voltage. We also have a problem that it will heat up any room it's in. But I expect that will happen pretty soon. It's going to be a bigger issue, I think, than people realize. And we just need to be conscious of that. Hopefully we can get green generation in place that can make up that power.
We're in the last minute and a half or so of Zeitgeist. I just wanted to ask each of you one last question myself. A theme that has run through the entire conference, which has talked a lot about the new responsibility, is what people can actually do in their lives to make the world a better place, and the issues you care about. You are both young men, but you have changed the world. You're in a position of influence. What one just short message would you want people here to hear from you about how you think they should take responsibility to do things that matter?
I found that the way to be responsible, it's not to for some people they may want to do this, but it's not through all this tremendous self-sacrifice, but rather to recognize the benefits of doing things differently and how much it can increase the quality of your life. I'll give you just some simple examples. Like I have a Prius, Toyota Prius that I drive, and why do I drive it? It's not actually, I don't care that much about the miles per gallon. It's actually a really, really good car. And the fact that I have the electric motor in there, I can parallel park on the hill in San Francisco, and I have really precise control of exactly, I can go in a really steep, tight spot, and I can do it no problem. Whereas, if I'm in a In a conventional car, it'll be like boom, 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 then you smash into the cars around you.
I have seen you have scratches on your car.
Not on the Prius. It's not completely accident-proof. But people don't recognize, people feel like, oh, I'm going to get a Prius and I'm going to get this really, skimpy little dingy car just to make the environment better and I'm sacrificing. That's just not true. If you look at light bulbs, so I put compact fluorescent in my house, if you can call them compact. But I don't get the ones, because they tell you to replace like a 60-watt one with like a 12-volt compact fluorescent or something like that. And that's, so you get the same light and you save a lot of energy. But really, you can put in a 30-watt compact fluorescent. You'll have a brighter, more comfortable home, and you'll have half the power. So I feel like people kind of have this attitude that they need to have a lot of self-sacrifice to improve the world, whereas it's really the things that can make your life better. And a simple thing is also just being generous, giving. I enjoyed recently, going up to San Francisco, gave out these socks at homeless shelters. And it's fun, it's really rewarding. I mean, it's not sacrifice at all. I mean, it was one of the it was I think on Christmas actually. It was one of the best Christmases I had. So I think people should learn to value the right things, and it's not about sacrifice.
I was just going to say, I think I just encourage people to question things. I mean, you can have very high leverage by sort of doing the right thing. I think that's why we're here. And I mean, I've been trying to spend my long vacations and so on in Africa, places like that, and you look at those, you figure there's 1 billion people in the world that are very, very impoverished. Imagine you were investing in their future, and say, they have the same percentage of smart people as we do here in the U.S., and probably more, in fact. And I don't know, people make $100,000 a year or something. You multiply that by 1 billion, you get a lot of money. So, and I don't know how much it would cost to have reasonable quality of life and education all for those people, but it's not that much compared to what they'd earn. So isn't there something wrong with the world that we're not able to invest in those people in some way that makes sense? I mean, that would be the world's greatest investment you could make, and I'm sure it would also be a really great, rewarding thing to do. And I just think there's so many things like that in the world, and somehow we're not making that much progress on getting them done. So I encourage people to think about those things.